One of the things that is so inspirational to me and that really has touched my heart is when I see a group of people who all get together in one accord and move to one intentionality. When your intention is noble, no matter how large of a group of people that you are part of, you begin to change the world. And it's incredible to see when people have noble intentions and when people are willing to lay down their life, when people are willing to go after the impossible and they're doing it in one accord, how much they can change in the world. And when I think in the scriptures of a group of individuals who lived out this type of life, I think about the disciples. And it's very interesting who the disciples were. Because the disciples, they were people that kind of seemed to have started from a deficit, who came from humble beginnings. Not really the most profound or prolific group of people, but there was something so common about the disciples. The commonality that they shared was that they were willing to give up their life. They were willing to give up their dreams and their aspirations to follow Jesus. And that's so inspirational to me because here these people are, just mere fishermen who have basic jobs, who are not seen as the most powerful or the most affluent people in their culture. And what they continue is a revolution started by Jesus. And to be honest, I find Jesus fascinating. Here is this man, whether you believe in the claims that he makes about himself or not, you have to admire the life of Jesus. Because here's this man who was born in Bethlehem and raised in a place called Nazareth. Not born to any power, not born to luxury, not born to any sort of prestige. A man who was the son of a carpenter or a stonemason, who started from poverty and continued in poverty. And even if you do not believe exactly the words that he has said, the fruits and the impact that he's made in our world today are undebatable. So how did this man change the trajectory of the world with individuals who began at a deficit, who all they saw for their life was being fishermen, and proceeded to change not just their reality, but even our reality 2,000 years later? And the other thing that really grabs my attention is what would happen later in the life of Jesus. You see, Jesus wasn't considered popular in his time. And so your association with Jesus actually meant that your life was threatened. It was meant that if you stood next to Jesus, that must have meant that you believed in the things that Jesus was claiming and Jesus was saying. And what fascinates me is that these young men and some women would latch on to this person who they did not fully understand yet and give their life to this individual. And we see that because when Jesus is crucified, and we see that he has lost his life, we also find that the disciples feel like they've lost their hope. See, they didn't really understand that he was God, but they had some hopes that maybe he was at least a warrior or a Messiah type character for their life. And so when Jesus dies, you would assume that if you were close to Jesus and you had risked your life over and over and over again, and then you die, that would make you angry with Jesus. But what we find in the life of the disciples, which is extraordinary, it says that when Jesus dies and all their hopes and dreams seem to have been lost, we don't find them angered. We don't find them in disbelief. We actually find them mourning for Jesus. And what that leads me to and helps me understand is that there was a connection that they had with him. What did they see in Jesus that despite them at that moment not fully believing what he said, they still loved him? You see, they weren't sure about who he was, but one thing was for certain, that they loved their dear friend, Jesus. And that they would go to the tomb to honor him. I don't know if you've ever had a type of relationship with somebody that you just love them so much that even if they were alive or in death, you would honor them. And it fascinates me because these are young men and young women with bright futures who could choose any sort of destiny, any sort of path for their life. And what they choose in this moment where all of their hope is lost, they didn't choose to continue with their life. They chose to take a step back, a moment, and reflect on how much they love Jesus. And that really touches me because, again, when you associated your life with Jesus, that means that your life was in danger. And so Jesus resurrects. Spoiler. He resurrects and he begins to walk amongst humanity. But it's very interesting because Jesus begins to walk around humanity and he is unrecognizable. When he walks amongst humanity, he's no longer in the image of the Jesus that they knew or understood. Some of them grew up with Jesus. Some of them only knew him for 3 years. And the Jesus that they spent with for 3 years and spent their whole life with was no longer the same Jesus that they recognized. His facial structure was different. There was something about Jesus when he resurrected that it wasn't his temporal body, but it was the complete essence of who God was on earth. And he would begin to do things that they could not comprehend, like walk through doors instead of opening them. I know some of you you try to walk through doors instead of opening them. I don't know why. But here he is doing things that are unbelievable. And what is astonishing to me, what is so important for us to understand is that they did not recognize his face or his appearance, but what they could recognize was his voice. That the way that they identified that this was the Jesus that they loved was not by what he looked like, but by the tonality and the words that he spoke. I've been in rooms with hundreds of people with my wife, and chaos would be ensuing all around me. I'm one of those people that I absorb my environment. I'm like a rechargeable battery, right? So if you put me in a room that's energetic, dude, I just get filled with energy. And when I'm in a room that's completely dead and whatnot, I just assimilate to the room. I'm one of those people that soak up everything that's going on around me. So when there's a crowd of 500, a crowd of 1,000 people, I get really overwhelmed. But do you know what's incredible? That even in a room of 400, of 500, or of 1,000 people, I can still distinguishedly recognize the voice of Kara. Kara could be on the other side of the room, and there could be a ton of different voices going on, but still somehow in a room of 500, I can hear the voice of Kara so distinctly calling my name. And it begs the question is, how do you hear somebody's voice when you cannot really see them? And what I realize is that you begin to associate yourself with the voice of someone when you've been intimate with them. When there's a level of intimacy with them that is different than all the other voices that you hear in a room. And so when I first started dating Kara, I couldn't really hear her voice apart from other people in a large setting. To me, it was just a girl's voice. But the deeper that we began to dive into our relationship, and the further we began to fall in love with each other, it was no question that when Kara called my name, it was Kara. And so here the disciples are, not sure of what they're seeing, not sure why Jesus is in this form that does not decay, that is not dying, that is not timeless, but they are sure that it's the Jesus that they love because of the time that they spent with him. And it's such a beautiful thing to me that these men would lay down their life for a person that they did not fully understand, but fully believed. That they would give their life to a cause that they would not see the fruition of, but at least begin because of their love for Jesus. And so I want to pick up in this moment in John chapter 21. You have to understand some context. Peter, he's betrayed Jesus. He's denied Jesus, and this is now the third time that Jesus has walked amongst earth in his essence, full essence and glorified body. And Peter has this guilt over his life because he betrayed someone that he loves. Have you ever felt any sort of betrayal in your life? Where it just absolutely wrecked your life and you're just hurt? Peter is the one who created the space for betrayal to Jesus. And so he's feeling down. They've seen Jesus twice already, but he's kind of just not fully admitted. He's not fully had this conversation with Jesus yet of, listen, I let you down. I saw you die and I betrayed you. And I love Peter because Peter is such a guy. Watch this. In chapter 21, John chapter 21, in verse 3, it says, Simon Peter said to them, I am going fishing. They said to him, we will go with you. I absolutely love this because that's such a guy thing to say. When you're a dude and you say you're going to do something out loud, that's the open invitation. Women are like, oh my God, I didn't get invited. And he's like, I said it out loud. That's literally such a guy conversation. I'm going to go fishing. We're going to go too. That's it. My wife all the time tells me, how was your day? And I go, good. She looks at me like, and I go, what? I need details, Juan. I need details. Give me the details. And I said, okay, honey, I'll give you the details. I left home. I drove to work, left work. I had to get in my car to get here, by the way. Now I'm home. And she goes, that's not details. And I'm like, yes, it is. If I were to say that to a dude, that's all that my day summed up to. Yesterday, I was talking to Dr. Bates, and I said, how are you? And he said, good. I said, all right, great. Let's keep on going. I know everything. I know everything. I got it. Your wife is good. Everybody's good. Okay, let's get down to business. That's such a dude thing to do. And then I realized that the reason my wife asked me for details is because she doesn't want to feel like she missed me all day, which I cherish and I love. And so, men, before you get married, realize that question is important, although it's extremely silly. It's very important because what your wife is communicating to you is, I've missed you and I want to feel like I did the day with you. Right. So I love this. Peter, the disciples, the guys, they're so cool. Let's go fishing. All right, let's go fishing. And you have to understand that this is their element. This is what they're really good at. This is what they spend time doing. So when they try to go find peace, they go to a sea somewhere to go fishing. Kind of like how some of us, we go play basketball, we go play tennis to kind of just be in our element. And some of you are better than others. So, kidding. So this says, so Simon Peter said to them, I'm going fishing. They said to him, we will go with you. They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. And I love this. Just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, children, do you have any fish? They answered him, no. There it is again. This is the guy conversation. No. What else do you want to know? And that kind of sounds like, well, that's a stupid conversation. Guys have stupid conversations all the time, but this one has some context. They cannot recognize that that's Jesus. They're far out. He does not look like Jesus. So it's some stranger calling them children because they're young, about my age. So that must have bothered them at first. Children. I'm like grown, dude. I'm like 27. Like, you know, it's a joke. So they're like, no, leave us alone, strange man, asking us if we caught any fish. Because clearly, you know we didn't catch any fish. Because if we had caught fish, we'd be on the shore eating the fish. But we'll have this conversation. So no. And he said to them, cast the net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. So they cast it. And now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of the fish. Now this is important. This is the context. This is the moment that we're going to look at. The disciple whom Jesus loved therefore said to Peter, it is the Lord. When Simon heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. Now, I absolutely love Peter, because Peter does absolutely the dumbest things in the world. Here, Peter is fishing with his boys, and you have to understand, you'd be like, what, he was naked fishing with them? That's what they used to do. They used to keep their cloaks and their clothes that they would use to walk around with, and they would fish in their undies. And so here he is with all his boys, I guess most of them in their underwear, and John, the one whom Jesus loved, I love how he calls himself that. No one else calls him that. But he's like, I'm the one that Jesus loved. Just in case you needed a reminder when you read this later, I'm the one who was there with him. All right, John. And here Peter is, minding his own business until John says, it's the Lord. And I love what Peter does, although it's extremely foolish. He wants to be presentable to Jesus. He wants Jesus to see him in his finest form. So what does he do? Man brain. I'm gonna put on my clothes and I'm gonna jump into the sea and I'm gonna embrace Jesus wet, full of I don't know, fish guts or whatever, and I'm gonna embrace him. What a guy. He put on his clothes and he jumped into the ocean or to the sea to meet Jesus because he wanted to be presentable and became extremely unpresentable. And this is kind of the theme in Peter's life. Peter doesn't really think things through. He kind of just acts because he's a passionate man. He's a man of passion, a man of honor, a man of stupidity, bravery, a man who is bold enough to do the unspeakable. When we think about Peter's life, we often think about his failures in life. Oh, Peter, the guy who drowned. But I'd like to look at Peter differently this morning because I think sometimes we get so lost in the details and we don't see the nuances in between each line. See, we remember Peter as the one who failed and he sunk in the sea, but we don't talk about how he was the only one that was bold enough to believe in the miracle that God was asking him to step into. You see, Peter wasn't the one who stayed in the boat. Peter was the one who was bold enough to take steps off the boat and walk with Jesus. And there's only two people in the whole scriptures that are recorded to walk on water. And one of them is Peter. Because he listened to the call of Jesus on his life and asked him to come. And he was the only one who said, I'm coming. Yeah. And he got off the boat and he began to walk and he sank. And that's what we remember. But we forget that he had the bravery and the faith in Jesus to, in the first place, walk on water. Yeah. I think some of us are so scared to where God is calling us to, because he's calling us into the unknown. He's calling us into the storm. He's calling us into the waves, and he's calling us into the drastic winds, and he's just calling us. And some of us, we'd rather stay in the boat and be the one to talk about somebody's change and somebody's life than experience the miracle of walking with Jesus. So here he is, and he sinks. He's also the man who, when he was trying to protect the love of his life, we often think of him as the one who betrayed Jesus, but hey, sometimes you can love someone and betray them. You'll learn that. Trust me. I've been there to betray. Sometimes our humanity gets the best of us and we betray in the worst ways possible, ways we would never even imagine. So don't think for a second that because you love someone, you don't have the potential to screw up. And so anyway, here Peter is with Jesus in the garden, one of the last moments that they're gonna spend together. And a Roman soldier comes to apprehend Jesus and take him. And what does Peter do? He grabs a sword. Now he's a fisherman. You have to understand, fisherman, where did you find that sword? That would be my first question. Where did you get that sword? And here Peter has a sword and to rescue, right? Jesus, to be his protector and his defender, because Jesus has defended and protected him and believed in him. He grabs a sword and he swings it at the Roman soldier and cuts his ear off. Now, he's not John Wick. He's not precise. Peter wasn't trying to cut the guy's ear off. He was just really bad at swinging a sword. He was aiming for the head. He was going to kill a man to keep Jesus safe. And thank God that he missed and only cut the man's ear off. Could you imagine the mind of the soldier? My ear's off, Peter was going in for the kill and he missed. And here he was, again, doing the opposite of what a Christian is supposed to do. But look what he witnesses. He witnesses Jesus, the one who he was defending, pick up the ear and put it back on the Roman soldier. Could you imagine what kind of mindset that soldier must have been in? What the heck? I can hear, started crying, So we remember him as the one who used the sword and cut a man's ear off, but we forget that he also saw Jesus heal his enemy. Imagine the impact of seeing the one that you're trying to protect, heal, and in a way defend the enemy. So we often think of Peter as the crass, bold one. But I'd like to take a step back and think of Peter as the one who just desperately loved Jesus. And he loved him in the way that he knew how to love. It doesn't mean that he made the best decisions. But there's a reason why Peter and John always seem to be at the center of Jesus' life. And it's because they loved him dearly. They would rather do life with Jesus than do it alone. So here's Jesus calling him. Actually, Jesus didn't even really call him. Could you imagine how embarrassed you'd be if the person that you betrayed was across the Walmart aisle and you see them? Ugh, I'm going to go to the tire section. You were like where the avocados are, and you're like, I'm going to go to the tire section all the way over there, like a mile over there, because this person will be, I can't see them. It's embarrassing. They're going to call me out. I knew I should have invited them to dinner, and here he is, and I betrayed you, Jesus. He's the only one of them who jumps out of the boat yet again to what he did not know was going to be the last encounter he had with Jesus. But again, he would have rather have jumped out of the boat and be made a fool than wait to get to Jesus. Look what the next verse says. So he put on the outer garments, for he was stripped, he was naked, and threw himself into the sea. Then the other disciples came in the boat, like the guys who came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish. So Peter was like, screw you guys, I don't care what you guys have to go through. I'm gonna jump, you guys do all the work. For they were not far from land. John wanted to let us know they were not far from land. Peter, we'll get there in 4 minutes. We were not far from land, but about 100 yards off. So I need you to understand what 100 yards is. I know our metric system is quite different here in the States than somewhere else. They were about a football field away from the shore. So Peter, naked and stripped, hears that God is on the seashore, the one that he betrayed, the one that you would be ashamed to look at. And instead of waiting 4, maybe 5 minutes, instead of waiting for the wind to pick up, instead of waiting for Jesus to come to him, he would have rather looked like a fool for love and swam a football field just to look at Jesus. What kind of a man was Jesus that would pull out of such a hard-headed individual like Peter to do such foolish things? What was the life that Jesus led, the life that Jesus emulated, the life that Jesus would call the disciples to? That despite their inability to be as educated as the Pharisees, they would have rather been looked as fools when talking about God than to not talk about him at all. You have no idea how many people I've heard, I can't believe you're a pastor and you don't have a degree. I said, I don't remember the last time that I had to talk about God and be qualified by man. Because my qualification isn't a stupid piece of paper. My qualification is the calling that God has in my life. So, the disciples, with no courtesy, no guard, fishermen, would do the impossible time and time again. Not for their benefit, not because they were qualified, but because they had found the love of their life. There is no boundary I wouldn't cross to get to my wife. There just simply isn't. Sometimes the most annoying parts of our relationship is my fault, really. Because it's like petty arguments about getting a cup of water or cleaning, And I think to myself, man, how can I say that I'm going to go through whatever possible to get to the love of my life if I can't even give her a cup of water, right? Like if it bothers me, to stop what I'm doing to do for her. When you love someone, no matter how small the task looks like, you're going to do it. And here's what I love, is that Peter was not perfect by any means. But that did not stop him from pursuing the love of his life and getting his life together to follow after Jesus and meet what Jesus called him to. And this speaks to us about character. See, a lot of us, we just experienced something incredible in church. Something that I pray begins to happen every other weekend at house. That people get baptized and they meet the God of the universe, and it's just like they're fired up. But God is not so invested in you being fired up as much as he is for you being devoted. And Peter, you have to understand, Peter never really was 100% perfect. Spoiler. But the quality that Peter had was that he was a friend till death. And he wasn't that at first. I mean, hindsight shows us that now. But I think we need to begin to give people room to grow. Because where Peter ended his life was not where he started his journey with Jesus. He first betrayed Jesus and then realized the loving grace of God and then gave his life for him. Could you ever imagine if all that Jesus was to him was some emotional fling? Was some emotional response? He would have never had the opportunity to grow into who God was calling him to be. Because sometimes when you love someone, it's going to take you into the most difficult spaces in the world. When you love someone, you're going to go through some really hard things. And that doesn't mean that if someone's manipulating you and taking advantage of you that you should stay. It means that when two people love each other, they'll go as far as love takes them. So here, Peter wasn't perfect, but I love that Jesus was so involved in forming their character. The reason why he spent years with them wasn't just so that they would know that he's the God of the universe. They wouldn't realize that until after. It was to develop who God was crafting them and making them into being. And one of the biggest challenges that we face in our modern Christian culture is that we've adapted sensationalism and called it faith. That as long as I feel this moment, that's where God wants me to be. And then we've confused the presence of God for a dopamine hit and called yourself holy just because you are high on the love that God gives. But what happened when love leads you to jump into uncertainty and you're 50 yards swimming to the love of your life and you're running out of breath and you don't know if you can make it? That doesn't feel good. But how far are you willing to go for love? See, this mentality of sensationalism, what it actually creates is that it stunts your character development. Because you will rather look for an experience. You would rather look for an experience than discipleship. Because it's really difficult to go to church and build something great when it takes time, when it takes failure, when it takes doing the things that are the smallest things in the world. It's difficult. It's really hard. And you will never see the finish line of what God's called you to if there's no love involved in what you're doing. And so we have so many people in our faith who've adapted a culture that as long as I am seen, then I love what I do. But what happens when you're not seen? God is not invested that you would appear like Jesus. He's invested that you would take on the character of Jesus. Because when you take the character of Jesus, you will go through the fire, through the trials. You will swim a whole stadium to get to him. How far will love take you? Love will only take you as far as love will take you. And when the epitome, when the definition of love is the person of Jesus, all of a sudden, attaining the love of a lifetime is possible. So a lot of us, we go from experience to experience because we know God has a calling for our life. That is one of the most difficult things to overcome in Christianity. When you know you have a calling in your life, but you're stocking shelves at Publix. When you know God's called you to be a preacher, and all that you have available to you is the people you know. And you get frustrated. And so you go to different positions, to different churches, to get hired by churches so that you would feel valued because you don't find value in the people that God has given you. And so you would rather leave the people that have done life with you to have a position so that people would look at you and when people would approve of you. And what you're doing is stunting the character that God wants to develop in you. And you can be 40 years old, 30 years in Christianity, and still be nothing but a child. Because what you're looking for is the check. What you're looking for is the value that you find in the people that are listening to you, not who you are. God is not invested in what you can do for him. He's invested in who you will become as you pursue him. So, oh man, I can't be stocking shelves here in Publix or in Walmart. I just can't do. God called me to write books. What can I do here? And you get frustrated. Because why does God have me doing this stupid job? I have such a big calling in my life. Yes, you do. But what if God is trying to create in you a character of patience? Because working with people requires patience. And you will never be able to lead a people if you cannot even lead yourself to do the best job you can at the job that you work. Could you imagine having to be the contractor, the preacher, the Bible study leader, the worship leader, all these things that the church needs, but you cannot be satisfied for where God is developing you because it's just simply taking too long. Love can wait. And love will shape you into who you're called to be. That nursing job that you have is really difficult. Because you have to meet a bunch of people that don't want help, but arrived to get help. Sounds like church to me. And God is trying to teach you, hey. You know, like a Southern gospel church. Let's go. Because God is trying to teach you, this is what Christianity is like. Because I've called you to be a teacher. And you're going to have to meet a bunch of people who are here for your help and tell you how you need to help them. And nobody thinks about these things because I just want Jesus, but also look at me. But God, in the jobs that you have and the things that you're facing, he's building your character for something that he's calling you to. That one person who is so annoying that you have to deal with, that is requiring a new level of faith for your life, congratulations. You've stepped into a new level of faith in your life. That's what God does in your life when you love him and he is the love of your life. Do not stunt your growth and the character development for your life just because God is breaking you. Because there's a beautiful thing about God. He breaks you, and he reforms you. And it's not once, it's all of your life. So instead of going from church to church to church to church to church, simply to feel, be loyal and faithful where God has called you to, because he's trying to develop your character. You will lose your life one day. We all will. You may get sick 50 years from now. I know most of this room, I did a survey. I know that our average age is young. It's beautiful. Spring chickens in here. But the lungs, in the capacity that you have right now to sleep only 3 hours, all right, and then just do life, it goes away. Do not spend your youth waiting to be seen. Spend your youth spending time with the unseen. Because the unseen has a trajectory for your life that will explode in your 30s, that will explode in your 40s. You know what I love about this? A huge accomplishment, I'll just say it, because I like to be really vulnerable, and it's also one of the most uncomfortable things about being up here, that I have to be vulnerable, otherwise it just doesn't work. And by I mean it doesn't work, Dr. Batel told me to be more specific. Doesn't work is just that if I'm not being open to you, then you won't really see what God's done in my life because I'm hiding something. That's what I'm saying. That was for you, Dr. Batel. Okay. Where was I? See, this is why I don't do it. What was it? Details? The details. Oh, yeah, so I opened up my heart to you guys, and no, I really forgot. See, that's what happens with the improvisation. Anybody remember what I was saying? Vulnerable, but before that. Oh, yes, thank you. It comes in the moment. This is hard. But that's perfect. That's perfect, actually. Don't clap for this, because then it's going to be weird. But we got like 100 views on one of our YouTubes. Just don't clap, because it's weird. And that's great for me. That's wonderful to me, because we're just started. Oh my gosh, how far God's brought us in a little bit of time. And we have 100 views on a talk that I never prepared for, that God was preparing in me for, it seems like, all my life. And that was the one that people shared the most. It was a big accomplishment to me. But you know what was so encouraging? Is that I'm not finished. I'm just getting started. Right now, in the small group of people that are here, I don't want to be part of a church that grows but has a small impact. And right now, we may be so young, but if we've focused and dig deep and dig deeper and deeper and hone our skills and be faithful, then the explosion of our life, although it's unseen right now, will be distributed to the world with the intention not to be seen, but to give. I want to be part of a place where you can get better and grow and be developed. And sometimes the conversations are hard, but they are worth it. Because God has a calling for your life. And it looks like chipping away at all the nonsense that doesn't belong in the future that God has for you. Yeah? So, a fool's love. Sometimes love makes you look like a fool. I know it firsthand. Man, I've done some stupid stuff. For love, some nonsensical stuff. And it honestly shows up more when I'm hurt by the love of my life. I don't know if you've noticed. When you enter into a relationship, you become really emotional when you feel like you failed. And that's when you do the most stupid stuff, when you're in pain. And you do it because you love that person, so you do some really dumb stuff. And love will sometimes make you out to look like a fool. But could you imagine a life where you do not experience love because you're afraid of looking foolish? Love will always lead you to look foolish. So embrace the fact that you will look foolish while you're pursuing the love of your life. And here's the beautiful thing. A fool's love, like a person who is in love and looks like a fool, doesn't care about how they look. They simply just care about hearing the heart and spending time with the one that they love. So what kind of impact did Jesus have in the life of Peter, that Peter time and time again would look like a fool for love? And I love this because there's a whole conversation that Peter has with Jesus that I think we will dive deeper into some other time. and spend a lot of time speaking about this conversation. But I just want to give you the brief synopsis. Jesus and Peter, that's what it's titled. So John's really good at this. Because when he has the conversation with Jesus, or when Peter and Jesus have a conversation about John, he calls it Jesus and the beloved apostle. But not Peter, right? He's not beloved or an apostle. I love John. So petty. Come to the house, John. There is a John here, right here. Juan. So petty. And I really love Peter. I love doing life with people that are like Peter, because they're so passionate, and they don't get everything right, but they never give up on you, and I love that. When they had finished breakfast, so the fish came, they finally hauled it, and they're all chilling there, and Peter is just soaked. Everyone else just showed up, and Jesus decides to cook them a delicious meal. So not only is he the God of the universe, but an incredible chef. I'm such a dad. All right. So it says here, when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John. Other versions say Simon, son of Jonah. That's for a different conversation. Do you love me more than these? And I just briefly want to read it. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, feed my lambs. He said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, tend my sheep. And he said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. See, Peter betrayed Jesus 3 times, and I like to look at it as if Jesus was covering the offenses that Peter made against Jesus in this moment. And not to spend too much time on that, but I want to spend on one thing that he said. And then I want to finish here. Lord, you know everything. This was this moment where Peter looked at Jesus and he was vulnerable. You know everything. You see, I would like to think that he wasn't being so philosophical when he said everything. I would like to think that he wasn't talking about, God, you know how atoms are made. You know the beginning and the end. I would like to think of this moment as Peter saying, Jesus, you know everything that I've done. Here Peter is looking like a fool, drenched in seawater, saying, you know everything I've done. I can just imagine the gaze of Jesus, not angered. You see, Jesus is not petty like us. He didn't ask him those questions to make him feel guilty. There was enough guilt in Peter. Our God is not rude. He's not mean. He's not demeaning. So he asked him that question because he wanted to get Peter to come to the conclusion that Jesus has seen everything Peter has done and will. And the response of Peter is, so you know everything. So you know that I love you. You know that when I cut the ear of that Roman soldier, I was angered. I was frustrated. You know that when I walked on the water, I failed. I didn't have faith. You've seen all my flaws. I betrayed you because I was scared for my life. But you also know this, Jesus. You know that I love you. Jesus, with 3 questions, penetrated through all callous, through all guilt, and helped Peter get to the conclusion that he loved Jesus. What kind of a person is Jesus that his question would not lead him to guilt, but to acknowledge that he loves him with all his life? See, God doesn't ask you questions, and God doesn't want to develop your character to make you feel insufficient or not worthy, but to help you lead you into the conclusion that if you're willing to go through all this, it's because you love me. And sometimes we need the reminder from God, the question, do you love me? There was another subtlety to this question that Jesus is asking him and us. How far are you willing to go because you love me? Jesus would not entrust starting the church to someone that did not love him. He would not entrust starting the church to someone who would abandon the mission. From the first response Peter had, Jesus told him, this is your calling. But it was the third question that broke the walls of Peter to ask him, how far will you go? Later in the conversation, Peter would find out how he would die. I would hate to know how I die. Keep it a surprise, homie. And he told him, you're going to die like how I did. See, Peter saw how that was. And you know what struck me as powerful? That this is a full circle moment. Because the last thing Jesus says to him in that conversation is, follow me. Follow me as far as love will take us. God is calling you. Don't wait. Don't spend all your life trying to fit in or to appear just for the acceptance of others. You can be a fool in the eyes of others because of what you are doing. And that will be just okay because you're doing it for God, not for anyone else. And what God does is that he gives you the journey of a lifetime. Even if it ends in death, even if it ends in the worst circumstances, at least I lived a life with the love of my life. And that is enough to get me to look like a fool, to get me to go through the mundane, to get me to go through the difficult. God has called me to build a church, so I'm going to build it, no matter how many times I fail. God has called me to establish new relationships, no matter if this one doesn't work out. Because I'd rather look like a fool than not experience the fullness of God. Amen. So let's get up this morning and let's worship.